Hello, and welcome to Regrets I've Had a Few. I'm Paul Hunter, Artistic Director of Told by an Idiot, and this is a podcast where I talk to friends and colleagues delving into what made them the person they are today.
Hello, and welcome. My guest this month is one of Britain's leading theatre directors, and he's been in and around and responsible for some of the best new writing in the UK over the past 25 years. He was an associate director at the Young Vic Theatre and Shakespeare's Globe, and he's collaborated with some extraordinary writers, including Martin McDonagh and Dennis Kelly. His work has been seen at the National Theatre, the Royal Court, London's West End, and New York. And I'm really proud and pleased to say he also directed one of our idiot favourite shows of mine, the Fahrenheit Twins. Welcome, Matthew Dunster.
Hi, Paul.
Hi, Matthew. It's lovely to see you and chat with you. Obviously, I know you well and we know each other well, and I've had the joy of being directed by you, so we'll touch on some of those things. But like I always do, I'm going to take you back to the beginning, which correct me if I'm wrong, was Oldham in Lancashire?
Yeah.
So obviously similar generation to me, and I think probably some things in common. I know you're a very keen football fan. Were you a keen player of football when you were younger?
Yeah, I was. Yeah, and I was. You know what they say: the older you get, the better you were. But yeah, I was a keen sportsman all around. I was captain of the school football team, captain of the Sunday League team, right in youth. Played for the town team, Oldham town team, a couple of times. I always feel a bit bogus because I only live about 500 meters from Oldham Athletic Football Ground. But the estate I was brought up on was an overspill estate, as they sort of cleaned out a lot of the slums in the 60s in Manchester. A lot of those families moved to what had previously been farmland where they built the estate I was born on and grew up in. And so a lot of the families that arrived were United or City fans. And the family that I sort of latched onto, they were City fans. But yeah, I played it as well. Yeah, played it.
So I as a very keen footballer myself, and we made a show earlier this year that celebrated the greatest ever achievement of my team, Aston Villa, when they won the European Cup in 1986. One of only 5 English teams to do that, Matthew. But I won't.
And my team haven't done it yet.
Anyway, I'm going to jump in with my first regret. Do you have any regrets that was not something that you pursued professionally, a life in football, or not?
Well, do you know what? There was a guy on my school team. When I was a kid, I was exactly the right age when they started the kind of first feeder system for the national team through Loughborough in Loughborough.
Okay,
I can't remember what it was called, but basically we would have been the first intake. And I had a kid who played on my school team called Mark Robbins, who's now the manager of Coventry, and famously kept Fergie in his job. And when you played with someone like Mark Robbins, you knew there was no chance that you were ever going to be a professional footballer, because it was just another league. Do you know what I mean? So, and I don't really have a regret. And to be honest, a lot of the things that I used to do that was sporting, once I started drama, I gave them all up, because the demands of being in the drama group at school were such that the teacher, one of the brilliant things about him was he sort of rigorously demanded such commitment that things like Sunday League football just all sort of drifted away. So no regrets, really.
No, I suppose that takes me slightly to my next question, which maybe is to do with how your earliest kind of connection to theatre or performance. Was there anything in the family, or was it through school?
No, through school, 100%. Very powerful kind of moment, really. I went to a comp, so everything was mixed. I can't remember whether we were streamed for English or not, or whether it was just, mixed like every other lesson. But my English teacher had a nervous breakdown. I don't think I was anything to do with that. but she had a nervous breakdown. And the head of English, a guy called Colin Snell, he came in and he said, right, you got to read. I want you all to read from this book, whatever we were studying. And everyone groaned, oh, God. And this girl called Elaine Cordin said, just if we're going to read, can Dunny read? Which was my nickname. And I think it was probably because I was the only one who could read. So I read out from this text. Well, I genuinely can't remember what it was. And after the lesson, he said, "Come here." So we're doing this school play. I'd like you to be part of it. And it was Kes. And I read it and I thought, oh God, I hope he doesn't want me to play the kid who falls in love with this bird. And he didn't, because he had a more established 14-year-old. And he asked me to play McDowell the bully, and I loved it. And I can remember being on stage, Paul, and it's that bit in Kes, where everyone gives their fags to that poor little kid who's just come to give the headmaster a message. And we were all stood in a line, and I looked at these other three actors stood in a line, and I thought, they're just stood in a line. I'm acting here. And I can remember sort of digging my foot into the floor as if I was bored. And I just remember thinking, I'm really good at this. And it was that instant. And that was it.
How old were you, Matthew?
14.
Okay.
And I had lots of other stuff going on in my life that wasn't great. I've written all about it in You Can See the Hills, a play that I wrote about me. And so there's lots of tough stuff going on. And I think it just landed at exactly the right time. And I loved it. So I definitely did it before I saw it. I think I might have seen pantos, but I became a fan of theatre through, again, this teacher taking me to more and more challenging and serious stuff as I went through school.
Well, it's interesting because it's a very similar experience to mine. Again, an English teacher who provoked me into being in a school play. But your school play sounds much cooler than mine, because I was in a production of Androcles and the Lion by George Bernard Shaw. So it sounds like I went to school in about 1875. But yours sounds much more raw court and cutting edge than but very. And then was there a youth theatre as well? Did you join a youth theatre?
No, I didn't need to, because the school was just so full on. We did 4 or 5 productions a year. When we were 18, we took 2 shows in 1988, when I was in the 6th form. We took 2 shows to the National Student Drama Festival. Orphans by Lyle Kessler, a really quite rough and ready American 3-hander. And I was in the year below me was the brilliant actor Paul Hilton, who's now about to play Iago. And so I was a year above him, and we just did everything together. We were blood brothers in Blood Brothers. I was Riff and he was Tony in West Side Story. So the two of us just went through this sort of incredible journey playing all these lead parts. And we went to the National Student Drama Festival when we were 18, and there was Rada there. And actually, did you go to Middlesex Poly or Leicester Poly?
No, Middlesex.
They were both there. They used to go to they were always a big presence at the National
When
Student
you
Drama
went,
Festival.
was it Scarborough?
When I went, and I'm going to finish the story just because of my ego. Me and Paul won the Best Actor award.
Shared it.
I only said that's the level that the school was at. But no, I went to the last one in Cambridge. In 88. But then I went back. We took another show when the people that hadn't got into drama school, we carried on doing stuff on our own with this teacher. And then we took Bouncers to Scarborough in 1991. And then I basically went from Scarborough to Bretton Hall. But I went to Bretton Hall because of NSDF, because at NSDF, the 3 main presences were always Bretton Hall, Leicester Poly, Middlesex Poly.
Because John Wright used to go there a lot. I remember going up and doing some workshops up there with him.
Yeah. He was a presence.
This is quite interesting as well, because obviously, have you worked professionally with Paul? Have you directed Paul?
Do you know what? We sort of drifted apart, and I think we sort of semi fell out when we left school. Not in a big radical way. And he went off to Welsh College, and I went off to Bretton Hall. And then we both ended up weirdly having played all these parts together, brothers in Orphans and all the rest of it. I mean, always the 2 sort of male leads. We both got a job in The Daughter-in-Law, directed by David Lannett, the young Vic, playing the 2 brothers. And weirdly, because I'm a year older, whenever we were at drama school, I was always the older brother. And I felt older than Paul, because a year at school is a big deal, isn't it? But when we went back to the young Vic, he played the older brother, and I played his younger brother, and it was just extraordinary coming back together. Like I think Paul described it as like just slipping into a pair of old shoes that you'd forgotten, how comfortable they were, and what a treat. Do you know what I mean? To have grown up with someone playing brothers and then gone away doing your own thing. And when we were in our early to mid 30s, we got to be brothers again professionally, which was great. And I directed him. He was my Dr. Faustus when I did Dr. Faustus at the Globe.
Oh, okay.
So
well, that's a fascinating journey, that you had someone that was that close to you at school that's gone on the same journey, well, different journey, but the same, essentially the same journey, and then and been very successful. And then I think about Bretton Hall, and obviously you and I have talked about this before, and I think about this in relation to where I went. Hayley and I were at Middlesex, and I think there seems quite a lot of connection between the training of Bretton and the types of people that came out of Bretton. So not necessarily a pure acting training, but about theatre makers and at Middlesex above us was people like Phelan McDermott and Julia Bardsley, and then of course around and in your time was an extraordinary group of performers that we both know: Mandy Lawrence, Richard Katz, the League of Gentlemen. Were you conscious of that kind of atmosphere of those types of theatre makers, or was that new to you when you arrived there?
It was new to me, and I needed to be sort of re-seduced by it, really. I mean, I'd seen it at the NSDF, and obviously the experimental stuff that those universities were doing, rather than what RADA was taking there or what Bristol or Vic was taking there, obviously pricked some part of my consciousness. I thought, I want a bit of that. But to be really honest, I couldn't get in any of the drama schools. So that's why I went. That's why I went to I went to Bretton Hall, and but yes, I was conscious of it, and I was blown away. I was very lucky because of this NSDF award. Between the ages of 18 and 21, I worked professionally in London. I worked at the National when I was like 20. And did a job at Payne's Plough and what was then Soho Poly. So I arrived like Billy Big Boots, do you know what I mean? Like I as a professional actor who had decided to come and train. I think what really blew my mind there was dance, because there was a fantastic dance thing. I mean, Bretton was just the perfect mixing pot because it had 3 theatre degrees: community theatre arts that I was on, technical thing. Then it had fine art, sculpture, dance, classical music, and pop music. I mean, so it was just, that was it. So the people you were hanging around with, the people that you got to make theatre with, it was just sort of built into the bones of the place, really. And I really enjoyed dance. And there was a company set up by lads who were in the 3rd year when I was in the 1st year, called Fecund, who I think are the kind of great lost company, really, of your generation, the companies that came through your generation, and Frantic, etc. And Mandy was a sort of founding member of that, and they were the first people I performed with when I left Bretton. So, I mean, I was sort of craved the experimentalism of it once I'd seen it. I didn't know it existed. It has to be put in front of you, doesn't it?
It does. You have to have
otherwise you just do George Bernard Shaw.
Of course you do. Of course you do. I was very good in it, Matthew, by the way. It's but I think I had a very similar trajectory. I didn't get into any of the established drama schools and went very reluctantly to Middlesex, very reluctantly and quite angrily, I think, if I look back. And it was only encountering John who opened my eyes to what theatre could be and what it was, and then obviously fortuitously meeting Hayley in my year that changed how I looked at things. And I often think, when I look at your work, and also having been directed by you, and I'm thinking probably more shows like Choice and Cressida when I did that with you, I think maybe my question is it feels to me that combination of stuff that's quite experimental in your background and in your training has kind of continued into the way that you look at lots of plays, whether they're Shakespeare or a piece of new writing. Would that be correct? Or
I feel actually probably more free when it's Shakespeare. or when devising something with, like I did with you guys,
Yeah.
Fahrenheit Twins, and you saw the work of a company that I had for a while, called The Work.
Yeah.
I think you saw Project B or Project. We
Yeah.
just used to say Project B or Project, and that's where I really feel free, because I do think actually the other reason that I direct is I kept being in things, or I wrote things and being very disappointed with how they were directed. So I didn't leave that college with any ambition to direct. I was very happy writing and acting, and had a pretty good, successful career in both those areas. But I sort of became a director by default. But it is connected, because I guess the thing that I felt people weren't doing was taking risks. But you've worked with me. I mean, what I saw, everybody, there was somebody came and wrote a chapter about in their book about our Troilus and Cressida rehearsals, and one of the things he said that really struck me was that I directed you completely differently than I directed everybody else. And I think that's about being sensitive to what an actor A needs, but B can provide based on their experiences and their confidence and their influences.
Mm.
And I just realized that you needed to dick about.
Yeah.
And that was, and then so what you do with someone, and I don't say that dismissively. I think that's about play, and that's about risk.
Yeah.
And then wait, and then shape your material, and particularly with you and Haley, I don't really like being in the room. I set tasks and go, I'll be back in half an hour. Let's see what you've got. You can't do that with everything.
No,
that
and
would feel very negligent in some.
no, and of course, and I think in a way it brings me back to football, really, because I think about really good coaches who they're not coaching every player exactly the same. I mean, they're saying to one particular player they might be giving much more direct tactical kind of instruction, and to someone else they're giving a different type of freedom. And I think you're right. I think that's certainly when I direct, I feel that's something that feels quite important in a way, is to both build a group but also be able to negotiate with people in different ways. So I remember seeing you in stuff and particularly loving you in a wonderful Richard Bean play at the Royal Court, which I'm now going to forget the name of, where you aged over
Harvest.
Thank you.
Harvest.
I absolutely loved that play, and it's the first time I saw performers I really liked, like Adrian Hood was in it, and I thought your performance was amazing. And I suppose, obviously, you articulated why you fell into directing, if you like. Have you ever had regrets around not keeping the performing going, or is that now a thing of the past?
No, it strikes me actually how emotional I feel when you ask that question, because it really is a regret, and weirdly, that performance at the Royal Court, I never really left the stage except to have a bit of makeup thrown on my face and get in a different wheelchair. I played him from 18 to 109. And lost my legs during the play, and so I used to just run off stage. People would pick me up because my legs were tied up and lift me out of one wheelchair, stick a different wig on and put me in another wheelchair and wheel me back on. There was one night I had a secret wall that the audience couldn't tell, because there's no way I could always get out the door, that in the blackouts I could push the wall, and it was on a and it was hinged. And one night I went up to this wall, nothing, didn't move. So I'm trapped in a wheelchair, can't get out. And I just basically smashed my way through the wall. There was no other way of doing it. So I've got to get changed. There's a completely different decade about it. But and that's the last time I ever went on stage. And so to do something that big and then stop is really sad in a way. But it just happened to coincide with when I started directing. And you'll know this, as directors, I mean, I know what I'm doing in 2024. Because we get booked in advance because we're in the brochure. So it happened so quickly, the directing, that there was just never any time. The young Vic did a 50th birthday thing recently. And they asked me to do a monologue, like, I don't know, 10 pages, and I learned it and I did it at this.
Okay.
There was 2 days at the end of lockdown, and that was terrifying to come back on stage, having not been on stage for 16 years.
Wow.
And do a monologue, but no one can help you, was absolutely terrifying. But I loved it and I miss it, and I would very rarely, very occasionally, some young director brings me up and says, we're doing a workshop, will you come and do
no,
week?
I'm sure.
And I'm like, yeah. And I just skip there. I just can't believe it.
And also, I find, as someone who has continued to do both, I still very much enjoy the sense that, and I've always believed this, and maybe it comes back to me enjoying dicking around, in your words. I've always been firmly of the belief, as you know, that a performer shouldn't carry responsibility at all. You have a responsibility to turn up and to listen and to engage, but you shouldn't carry responsibility. I think that's whereas the director should and needs to. So I like this,
responsibility is crippling. It's like, I've probably spoken to you about this before as a mate, but the amount of anxiety and therapy that I had to get through when I started directing. I mean, I just never sleep. I just was like, I felt so responsible for the whole thing. I managed to get on top of that a lot, but I mean, actors often don't like it when I say this, because it can sound a bit sort of dismissive of what they do, but it's really not. I do think it's the difference between being a parent and a child. You want your children to play and you want to shield them from responsibility, but that doesn't mean you think they're sort of infantile idiots, to quote the other. It's just you shoulder that responsibility. And I love when I love the notion of actors finishing at 6 and going to the pub. And that's very important.
No, and I think it's an interesting thing, because I haven't touched on a huge part of what you do, and that's writing. And I think that clearly is something that you are really passionate about, and I imagine also informs so much of how you think about things. Whether it's adapting something like Saturday Night and Sunday Morning, or as you say, writing your original work. Do you think that sense of you as a writer has helped you when you've gone on to collaborate with? I imagine quite strong. I've only met him very briefly, but quite strong personalities like Martin McDonagh. Do you think your own sense of being a writer helps with that, or not? It doesn't matter.
I don't know. I mean, with Martin, it was just about getting over. I don't know why I was sort of so awestruck or scared of him, because the way I met him was really good fun. He was in Paris, of course he was, and I got the Eurostar, and we got absolutely smashed. And then I got the Eurostar home, and just before I got on the Eurostar, he said, "Let's do it," which was when I directed Hangman. I'd never met him before, and I realized now that was probably my audition.
Yes.
But when we were auditioning for Hangman, I was auditioning with Amy Ball, the casting director, so the three of us. And then every time there was like a proper break, me and her would run out of the room, desperate for the toilet. And I said to her, "Why do you always wait till you're desperate, and why do you only go to the toilet when I go?" And she's like, "Because I don't want to be left in the room on my own with him." And I was like, "That's why I wait because he's incredibly, on one level, imposing, which is about, I think, a kind of projection based on just the weight of his craft. I mean, he's absolutely one of the best.
No, it's phenomenal. But I also think I remember seeing your brilliant production at the Royal Court of Hangman, and I went with another writer friend of mine, Carl Groves, and we watched it and loved it. But I think you and I talked about this afterwards, but it won't surprise me if I refer back to one of your colleagues from the Bretton Hall days, because that production contained for me one of the finest piece of physical comedy that I think I've seen and that was obviously Rhys Shearsmith in that moment towards the end of the play.
With the chair.
Yeah. Oh, utterly phenomenal. And I just wonder, I think you answered this, but I want to ask it again for the listeners, is how you negotiated that moment as a director with the obviously brilliant instinct of that particular performer. What was that negotiation?
Do you know what Rhys will say to you? and it's really disarming. He'll be approaching a moment, and before he does it, he'll go, "How funny do you want it?" And I'll go, "Really funny." And he'll go, "Are you sure?" It's a bit like that. Have you seen that thing where he's improvising behind Peter Kay?
No, no.
Oh, you got to watch it. You got
Okay.
to, that thing where Peter Kay just drives that woman to work.
Oh
every
yeah,
day.
yeah.
And there's always a different person in the back seat. Watch the outtakes
Okay.
it's sensational. Anyway, and he can just turn it up. It's like he's got some sort of dial. But I remember, again, it's a bit like working with you. You watch someone play, and you feed back what choices they think that you think work the best. But the great thing about it was that was sort of irrelevant, really, because it occurs when a chair gets kicked over.
Yeah.
And that is so unpredictable. The chair might not fall over.
Yeah.
It might slide a foot. It might nearly go into the audience. And to watch him find a new bit of comedy based, like sometimes it's a move an inch, and you just sit on it.
Yeah.
And I don't know why, that was hilarious. But he just always, he's just a very, very instinctive clown.
Of course, and I also think what you said was why the audience loved it so much is that the audience, even if it was only subliminally conscious of it, they were conscious of something that was genuinely happening in the here and now. So it wasn't a piece of choreography or a piece of blocking, it was genuinely a performer responding to something, and obviously that really appealed to me. But and then you went on to work with Martin McDonagh again on the Hans Christian Andersen.
A very, very, very dark matter. Yeah.
And which I was working and didn't see. But how was it returning to something very different with him? Because I imagine that play is very different to Hangman.
Well, by then we were very close and we were friends. So, we cut a couple of scenes from the very, very, very dark matter during the previews. I don't think I would have dared proffer that in the first relationship.
Yeah.
It was good. I mean, I really loved that play. He's less proud of it now. I thought it was very interesting because it's a kind of sister play to his greatest play, The Pillarman, because they're both essentially about the freedom of the writer and whose stories. I guess The Pillarman is about everybody needs to tell stories, and that's your first responsibility as an artist. And A Very, Very, Very Dark Matter was really about colonialism and whose stories get told. The people whose stories tend to get told and retold are the old white men, like Hans Christian Andersen or Charles Dickens. And what Martin proffered was that they had black women enslaved in their attics who were probably writing the stories. That obviously a metaphor for the fact that white men historically for time have collected folk stories, expressed them in a different way, and made fortunes from it. So it was a sort of radical idea, really. It was great, and again worked with Jim Broadbent, who again just needs to play.
Yeah.
It's like it's sort of, and in a weird way, this might sound dismissive, but he's kind of undirectable. Just got to let him get on with it. It's like, I mean, really let him get on with it, because it directions just seem like to slightly block him or confuse him. Because he's working something out on his own, and that was a real sort of privilege to watch. And again, that comes with age and experience. I think if I tried to direct Jim when I was in my mid-20s, I would have just dissolved into a pool of anxiety. But now,
it's true, isn't it? As hopefully as one gets older, it's like when Catherine Hunter directed me and Edward Pethebridge in My Perfect Mind. Catherine for me remains one of our great stage actors, and indeed on film increasingly more so. But and she was such a big, as a young actor, when I saw her in some of those early Complicito shows and The Visit, I thought, this is astonishing. So even though we'd become pals, it was still quite a daunting thing at times to, we asked her to direct that play, partly because I was Edward Pepperbridge was very prickly around who was going to direct it. So I was trying to. Haley said, "What about Catherine?" And Catherine obviously had played Lear, had played the Fool, and and it takes time sometimes, I think, to get over. I find when you're so not in awe exactly, but you admire someone very much, and then suddenly you're collaborating in quite a close way. It takes time for that journey to go on, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And it's a shame in some ways because it can be crippling, and it makes me wonder whether everyone goes through that, or if it's just people from our kind of backgrounds that go through it. Some people just seem to bound into any scenario with anybody with a great deal of confidence. But you're talking about respect for talent and being in awe of someone, and I totally get that. That's my favorite Idiot show. I just loved that show.
Thank you very much. No, it's very close
powerful
to us, I think, that, and it was so lovely that it seemed to affect a lot of people because on one level I thought this is about acting and theatre, all the things that I don't really like to see on stage, but it was also about obviously friendship and more than that. So no, I'm really pleased you like it.
It was about a very kind of key piece of humanity, which is about identity and
who we are, what makes us who we are.
And when that potentially a big element of that starts to fall away and unravel, it was really brilliant.
Oh, well, thank you. And I'm also, I remember talking to you because I think of you in that very much as and not all directors are, but I think you very much as an actor's director, and some of that obviously goes all the way back to you being an actor. And I remember you talking about actors you admire, and now you're working with some, as you always have been, some fantastic high-profile actors. If you could direct anybody on stage at this moment, who would you cast and why?
Oh my God, I don't know if I can answer it.
No.
I mean, do you know what? I wish I could remember a name. This is really insulting that I can't. There's an Irish actress who is in Martin's new film, The Banshees of Inisherin.
I've seen it. She played the sister.
The sister.
She's wonderful.
I saw her in some of Martin's early plays, and I saw her in a brilliant production of Dennis Kelly's play After the End at the Bush, and then she moved out to Hollywood, and she lives in America now, and she's got a very successful career. I think that performance in The Banshees of Inisherin is just off the charts.
Yeah, it's very good.
Just beautiful and brilliant.
Yeah.
So, and I've been stalking her a bit because she's been on a few chat shows in America. So I just, because of the film, and I've watched her, and I just think she just seems just like a massive human spirit. So that's not very helpful.
No, I think that's a really wonderful answer, because I was thinking of someone who, I think again, I'd be slightly awed by it. But if I was to work with this person in, whether that's directing or making something or performing, this will never happen. But I think for me, it would be Mads Mikkelsen. I think he's such an astonishing performer, and his background was dance. He came to acting through dance. And have you seen a film called Another Round?
No.
I
know the actor you're talking about.
Yeah,
wonderful,
I highly recommend it. It's a Danish film, and it was my film of the year last year. It's about a group of 4 middle-aged ordinary Danish men who are going through midlife and all of this. And then one of them suggests that through research he's done scientifically, they will be happier if they keep their alcohol intake topped up to a certain level. So they have a pact to drink only during the day, but to keep the alcohol up to a certain level. And I'll only say that, but it's joyous and funny and celebratory and sad. And the performances, including Mikkelsen and these Danish actors, are brilliant.
It's great to hear that he can do that, because have you seen The Hunt?
Yes, I enjoyed that.
I mean,
enjoy's the wrong word, but he's brilliant in that.
Yeah. And that seems, in terms of an actor's range, to be at the opposite end of
exactly
what you're describing.
That's what makes me think, because I found that film visceral, that film, The Hunt. I really did. I found it very, very powerful.
Brilliant.
Matthew, I could chat much longer, and we should do it over a pint. We keep saying this, but now we've reconnected.
Yes.
Let's do that soon.
Yeah.
I always finish with a few rapid fire questions, random questions. If you say the first thing that comes in,
Kerry Condon. Kerry Condon is the name of that actress.
Oh, is it? Oh, brilliant!
Yeah.
I saw the film the other night and I thought it was
Kerry
amazing,
Condon.
wasn't it? Really amazing film.
Yeah. Yeah, terrific.
Anyway,
sorry, go on.
Your first answer that comes into your head: Ray Winston or Javier Bardem?
Ray Winston.
Merlot or Rioja?
Rioja.
Cornwall or the Lake District?
Cornwall.
You have to put your prejudice aside for this next question, Matthew. Yeah. George Best or Colin Bell?
Colin Bell.
On that note, you simply couldn't do it. And for that, that's a brilliant end. Matthew, thank you so much for joining us. People will love this. Mate. It's really lovely, and I mean what I say. Through a round before Christmas, let's get together.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic.
Love to the family. Love. Cheers, Matthew.
Yeah, see you, mate.
Take care.
Bye. Bye.
Dear listeners, if you've enjoyed this idiot podcast, please spread the word